Rick and Marty Lagina have just pulled off the biggest Oak Island breakthrough in history, a $150 million treasure haul linked to the legendary Knights Templar. Hidden deep below the island, the vault wasn't just filled with gold bars, but relics stamped with centuries-old Templar seals, proof of a connection historians have argued about for decades. The find was so massive, it triggered immediate interest from governments, collectors, and even the Vatican. Security on the island doubled overnight as crates of gold and artifacts were pulled from the ground under tight guard. This isn't just another Oak Island dig. It's the discovery that could rewrite history and spark a global scramble for control. If you want the full story of this unbelievable unearthing and the secrets still buried, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because what comes next could change everything we know. The Atlantic fog rolls in thick and low, a living thing crawling over the shoreline, swallowing the old wharf, drifting up through the trees. The air is damp and cold enough to seep into the bones, but inside the war room the air hums with static tension. Rick and Marty Lagina lean in over the long wooden table, its surface cluttered with charts, laptops, coffee mugs gone cold hours ago. At the center sits a sonar monitor, its green glow painting their faces an eerie shade. The display pulses with a reading unlike anything they've seen in decades of digging. An anomaly so dense, so massive, that when the signal spikes, the equipment briefly shorts out. The location flashes on the map overlay, a quiet patch of Oak Island that hasn't seen a major excavation in over 150 years. No visible landmarks except a single cedar post, weathered silver and leaning like it's been standing guard since before living memory. Marty studies the numbers, lips tightening. The density reading is impossible for natural geology. It suggests either a single continuous body of refined metal the size of a truck, or something stranger still. Rick doesn't take his eyes off the monitor as he reaches for a brittle leather-bound journal on the shelf behind him. It's an 18th century volume, its spine cracked, pages browned and brittle. He turns to a dog-eared page marked with a frayed ribbon. In ink faded almost to invisibility, a 1795 entry tells of the buried son of Solomon, hidden where the sea's veins run beneath the earth. Rick's voice is low as he reads it aloud, and the room seems to lean in. Those words align eerily with the anomaly's position, just beside one of Oak Island's ancient man-made flood tunnel branches, the same kind designed to drown intruders in seconds. The engineers warn that drilling here could destabilize the whole underground network. Collapse, flooding, loss of equipment, or worse. But there's no hesitation in the brothers' eyes. This is the kind of reading you wait your whole life for, the kind you don't walk away from. The call is made. This will be their next target. Hours later, the war room's light is replaced by the thin blue glare of a monitor, showing a digitized maritime chart. Doug Crowell has the floor now, spreading out the overlay and adjusting the transparency so the new coordinates line up. The effect is immediate. A pinprick of ink on the centuries-old map sits exactly over the anomaly. Faint, almost invisible. But there, Sanctum Aurum. Holy gold. Doug explains it's a 14th century chart drawn at the tail end of the Templar era. The brothers exchange a glance, and Marty reaches for another document. This one a translated fragment from a suppressed French court record. It tells of the final nights before the Order's fall, when Templar knights loaded crates of crowned ingots aboard vessels bound for the land across the Sunset Sea. The ships vanished from recorded history, but ocean current studies show that in favorable winds, such craft could have reached Nova Scotia in under 3 weeks. They could have slipped into Mahone Bay without ever being seen by English eyes. Ground-penetrating radar has already swept the site. It confirms a cavern directly beneath the anomaly. its outer walls made from alternating layers of granite and crushed quartz. This isn't natural formation. It's deliberate engineering. The alternating materials could deflect primitive mining tools, even mask the chamber from certain detection methods. The closer they look, the more it becomes clear. This isn't just a hiding place. It's a fortress. By nightfall, the dig site is alive with motion. The floodlights glare off damp steel as the crew positions the drilling rig over the marked coordinates. Machinery clanks and groans. Hydraulic pistons hiss. The diesel engines growl, echoing into the dark. The drill head is a monster, forged to bite through both natural stone and ancient masonry, and it begins its descent with steady, brutal precision. The first 20 feet offer little more than dark peat and compacted soil, centuries of decay compressed into layers of resistance that crumble away under the drill's torque. But then, at a depth of 35 feet, the sound changes. The high, whirring grind drops into a slow, grating churn as the bit meets something different, a layer of dense, blue-gray clay. Rick steps forward immediately. They've seen this before. The same clay was recovered from the Money Pit years ago, a material so alien to Nova Scotia's geology, it had to have been transported here. Testing showed it came from far inland, carried and compacted into a watertight seal. Whoever built this barrier had gone to extraordinary lengths to keep something safe. It doesn't make sense for 18th-century settlers to have done this. They had no means to excavate, transport, and compact this much clay on such a scale. But for a medieval order with access to fleets, manpower, and engineering knowledge far ahead of their time, entirely possible. Likely, even. The drill chews deeper into the clay, the sound reverberating through the steel rig. The air at the site grows tense. Then the slurry begins to come up, a thick, muddy mix of water and pulverized material, glistening under the harsh white floodlights. That's when someone notices the shimmer. Fine gold flecks are swirling in the return line, catching the light with every turn of the pump. Marty leans close, eyes scanning. It's too pure to have formed here naturally. This isn't gold ore. This is refined gold, shattered and suspended in the slurry. The excitement is immediate, but so is the unease. The pumping slurry begins to bubble, but not chaotically. The bubbles rise in a slow rhythmic pulse, almost like a breath. It's not a pressure leak they've seen before. This is something different. A regular measured pulse from somewhere deep below, as though the earth itself is answering the intrusion. Rick meets Marty's gaze across the drilling platform, the gold-flecked slurry churning between them. Neither speaks, but the unspoken thought is the same. Whatever lies beneath Oak Island has just become aware of them. The winch groans as the latest core tube is hauled up, mud and water cascading off its length. Nestled within, the glint of something unmistakable catches the light. Not just a fragment, but a solid, worked surface. By the time the team carefully frees it from the muck and seals it in a padded case, the weight in their hands tells them this is no ordinary find. Hours later, under the stark white glow of the field lab, gold dust still shimmers in the floodlights as the gilded panel lies cradled in its tray, its cross-pate catching each beam like a beacon from another age. The edges, warped and pitted from the relentless crush of centuries, tell of unimaginable pressure, yet the surface itself remains unblemished, untouched by corrosion or decay, as though sealed away from time itself. The lab team works in near silence, the air thick with anticipation. When the first purity reading comes back, 99.9% gold, no one speaks. It is the same metallurgical signature found in coinage minted under the Templar-controlled Portuguese crown in the early 1300s. The match is too precise to dismiss as coincidence. This isn't just treasure, it's provenance. Marty leaned over the monitor, his brow furrowing. The engraved cross wasn't a crude imitation. It was identical to funerary engravings carved into limestone sarcophagi in Tomar, Portugal, the last fortified refuge of the Knights Templar before their disappearance from history. The etching lines, the proportions, even the faint inconsistencies in the curvature were a perfect match. It was as though this small panel had been lifted directly from a Templar reliquary and buried beneath Oak Island's unforgiving earth. The moment broke when static crackled over the site's radio frequency. Marty's voice, steady but taut, relayed the finding to the drill crew above. That was when it began. A deep, resonant groan rising from the bedrock beneath their feet like the earth itself was straining. The vibration was faint at first, just enough to make the loose gravel tremble, but it grew steadily, crawling up their legs through the metal flooring. Rick froze mid-step, his expression shifting. He had read of this in the Chinon parchment, one of the last Templar documents authenticated by the Vatican itself. A single line had stayed with him for decades. The vault shall answer intrusion as the horn answers the hunter. The warning was no metaphor. In the dimly lit tent, the words took on a chilling clarity. If the vault had indeed been engineered as a defensive system, they had just triggered it. Above ground, the shift was instant. Pump gauges on the main rig began to spike in erratic bursts. Within moments, a surge of water roared up the borehole from an unseen channel deep below. Across its top face was a hand-stamped Crusader's cross, each arm ending in flared fleur-de-lis points, as crisp as the day it was struck. Just below, in a shallow groove, a series of numerals wound along the surface. No obvious sequence, no mint marks. Rick leaned closer, tracing one with a fingertip. The numbers looked almost devotional, as if carved for a purpose beyond mere record-keeping. The gold itself was surprisingly warm, and not just from touch. Lab instruments would later confirm a residual heat from the mechanical friction of its extraction. Doug ran a portable XRF scanner across the surface. Gold purity, off the charts. But there was more. Trace spectrometry picked up micro-residues embedded deep in the metal. Frankincense, myrrh, and a faint organic profile consistent with aged olive oil. The lab techs swore this combination matched known sanctified vessels from medieval religious orders. In other words, this ingot may once have been a chalice, a reliquary lid, or some other holy artifact, melted down and cast into its present form. Rick, eyes fixed on the bar, spoke almost absently. If this came from a Templar sanctuary, then every bar below could be the ashes of something sacred, looted, repurposed, a war chest hammered out of holiness itself. His voice carried that mix of awe and unease you hear when someone realizes they're holding not just wealth, but the ghost of history. And there was more below, dozens more, from the brief flashes the downhole camera had caught before the claw had latched onto this one. Each glint in the dark hinted at another million-dollar ingot. Even with the most conservative spot market rates, the Hoard could easily become a generational fortune. The probe's second descent confirmed it. As the camera drifted through the shadowed chamber, rows of gold ingots appeared like the backbone of some mechanical beast, each bar stacked with almost obsessive precision. The light swept across iron-banded chests, their hinges bloomed with centuries of rust but still intact. Between the stacks, nestled on carved stone plinths, sat reliquaries studded with rubies the size of thumbnails, their gilded frames worked with spiraling vine motifs. Marty's voice was low, the kind of tone that meant he was doing math in his head and not liking the simplicity of the answer. That's easily 150, just in raw gold weight. If we add historical premiums, he didn't finish because the number would be obscene. Rick didn't even glance at him. You know what that could fund back then? He said softly. Ships, voyages, settlements. Centuries before Columbus, they could have been here, quietly shaping what came after. The two brothers locked eyes across the chamber feed, both aware that the implications of what lay beneath their boots might dwarf the fortune itself. The camera's pan caught more than gold. It caught history refusing to stay buried. In the far wall, a carved recess cradled a pair of stone tablets. Their surfaces were etched with dense Latin invocations, spiraling outward into geometric mandalas. The patterns radiated with a symmetry too precise to be random. Sacred geometry, the kind whispered about in both cathedrals and secret lodges. Then the chalice appeared. It was caught in a slant of camera light, perched inside a cedar box lined with decayed velvet. Its surface was crusted with jewels in a configuration Rick swore he'd seen in a 14th-century illustration of the Grail of Saint Bernard, the relic that vanished when the Templar fleet fled La Rochelle. That single frame from the feed was enough to freeze every man in place. Lying beside it, propped against a chest, was an ornate longsword. Its pommel glinted with inlaid silver, the crossguard etched with interlocking circles. Down the fuller ran two words in elegant script, Deus Vult, the Templar battle cry, still legible, still sharp. Doug's voice broke the trance. The gold might be the decoy, he said. The real treasure, what they wanted to keep safe, are those relics. The wealth just kept the vault intact, kept scavengers at bay. Rick barely breathed the next words. We're not just holding treasure, we're holding the heartbeat of history. And in that moment, the value shifted entirely. The gold was heavy, but the story, the undeniable proof of a hidden chapter in the world's past, was heavier still. Even before the claw rose clear of the shaft, the weight of that truth seemed to press upward, seeping through the soil and out into the night like an unseen current. The island, once a quiet sentinel, now felt exposed, its secret stirring the air above, sending invisible ripples far beyond the dig site. Somewhere out there, forces that had waited centuries for this moment were waking. Searchlights swept across the island like restless sentinels, their beams slicing through the salt-heavy night. The air was tense, brittle, as if every molecule knew something extraordinary had been unearthed and now hung in the balance. Word had slipped, not to the public, not yet, but enough to stir the world's shadowed corners. Historians whispered over encrypted calls, private collectors shuffled funds in anticipation, and unseen networks began to align like chess pieces in motion. The Canadian government issued polite but pointed inquiries under the bureaucratic guise of heritage asset preservation, though the careful language couldn't hide the steel behind it. Offshore, a dark, unmarked vessel loitered just beyond the reef, running lights extinguished, its silhouette sharp against the starlit horizon. Nobody claimed it. Nobody needed to. On Oak Island itself, the transformation was immediate. Security tripled, the brothers sparing no expense. Floodlights turned night into an artificial day, washing the dig sites in a cold, unwavering glare. Private contractors in black fatigues patrolled in pairs, radios murmuring low, hands never far from their sidearms. The whine of generators filled the air, masking the sound of the sea. The crew moved with an urgency that was part exhilaration, part fear. They knew the gold was worth a fortune, yes, but what they didn't yet grasp was that it had become a geopolitical fault line. Somewhere across the ocean, in a place far older and colder than the Atlantic, someone else knew exactly what had been disturbed. Reports trickled in with the precision of rumor, always unverifiable, yet too consistent to dismiss. A Vatican research envoy had been dispatched to Halifax, officially to inspect archival documents, unofficially to nobody said. Nobody needed to. The image of black-suited men stepping off a transatlantic flight and vanishing into the back of a waiting sedan stuck in Rick's mind. This wasn't just history anymore. It was history someone wanted back. Marty said it plainly one night by the fire. This treasure isn't just valuable. It's a lightning rod." His voice carried a weight the crew had never heard from him before. The Hoard, if that's even what it could be called, was more than a financial windfall. It was a legacy older than their nation, possibly older than the nation-state concept itself. And in some unspoken way, everyone around that table understood. This would end up in a fight. The only question was, how soon? The vault had one more secret to give, and it came without warning. At its base, the cameras caught something even the most skeptical crew members couldn't deny. A massive stone seal, hewn from a single block, its surface carved with meticulous precision. A skeletal hand, bony fingers wrapped around the shaft of a cross, stared back at them from the darkness. The details were too deliberate to be mere decoration. This was a message, and it was not a friendly one. Chiseled beneath it, worn yet still legible, were Latin words, qui tollit, tollitur, debitum sanguine solvitur. Rick read it aloud in a low voice, his translation turning the air colder. He who takes shall be taken. The debt shall be paid in blood. Silence claimed the chamber. Not the practical, focused silence of work, but the kind that comes when ancient echoes press close. Rick remembered fragments of stories, cursed hoards that destroyed every soul who touched them, ships vanishing at sea after lifting relics from long-buried crypts, families that withered into ruin after claiming blessings they didn't understand. He'd always chalked it up to myth-making, but here it was, engraved in stone. And then, as if to punctuate the warning, the winch hauling a gold-laden chest groaned violently. Without warning, the load slipped, the steel cable screeching as it tore across the drum. The chest dropped several feet, the impact sending a shudder through the platform above. The snapping of the secondary line was like a rifle shot, and two crew members barely dodged as the end whipped past them, slicing deep into the timber floor. The gold stayed intact. The men did too, but just barely. No one spoke for several minutes after. That night, the debate stretched long past midnight. The brothers and the core team sat around the site office table, a bare bulb swinging slightly overhead. Some argued they'd come too far to stop. That superstition had no place in a project of this scale. Others, especially the ones who'd been in the vault when the winch failed, weren't so sure. It wasn't just the inscription, or the near miss. It was a creeping sense that they'd already taken more than they should. Rick sat silent through most of it, weighing something heavier than gold. Finally, in the dead hush between arguments, he spoke. "We leave part of it." The words seemed to hang there, defying gravity. "We take what we can secure, what matters most for study, but we seal the rest. Not forever, maybe, just not now." Marty bristled at first, but the more the idea was dissected, the more sense it made. The world was watching, or would be, the moment news broke. And they weren't ready for that fight. The plan took shape in hushed, deliberate steps. Only the most significant relics and a modest selection of gold bars, enough to prove the find without advertising the full scope, were extracted. Every artifact was documented, tagged, and locked in custom-built crates. The vault's entrance was reinforced with steel and poured concrete, the borehole itself sealed beneath a lattice of heavy plates. Access from this point on would be granted only to a short list of trusted hands. By the time the last crate was loaded into the transport, the island had begun to change again. A thick, creeping fog rolled in from the bay, swallowing the floodlights in swirls of damp silver. It muffled the sounds of boots on gravel, the low rumble of diesel engines, even the ever-present crash of the Atlantic on the rocks. It was as if the island itself was drawing a curtain over what had happened, guarding its secrets once more. Rick stood at the edge of the dock, watching the barge ease away, the gold locked in its steel containers like sleeping giants. He didn't turn when Marty joined him, both men staring into the fog as though it might part to reveal the centuries that had come before them. "At last," Rick spoke, not to anyone in particular. and maybe not even to the present. Oak Island never gives up all her secrets, he said quietly. But tonight we've taken one back from the dark. The words vanished into the mist as the island waited, patient as ever, for the next hand bold enough or foolish enough to try again. And if you think this discovery marks the end of the Oak Island mystery, think again. The gold is just the beginning, and what's still buried could rewrite history itself. Make sure you like this video so more treasure hunters can join the chase, subscribe for the next chapter of the hunt, and hit the bell icon. Because when the next piece of the puzzle surfaces, you'll want to be the first to know. The island isn't done speaking, and neither are we.